We will now move on to valedictory statements, and I'll call the Leader of the Government, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, on each significant occasion for me in this chamber, from the moment I started sitting in that seat right at the back, the moment when I gave my first speech, every budget, my wife Hayley would be in the chamber with me, and that was always very special. Today, she would have liked to have been here, but we live in the sort of times where what seemed entirely straightforward when I first joined this chamber is not straightforward right now. Travel logistics between Perth and Canberra, which were straightforward for a very long time, are anything but. In terms of flight connections, in terms of capacity to re-enter your own state after you come to a place like Canberra. So, sadly, my amazing wife, who's carried much of the burden for me being able to do this job over the last 13.5 years, is not here today, and our two beautiful children, Isabel and Charlotte, are not here today. So that is a small regret as I now start to give what is going to be my final speech in this chamber. Mr. President, how good is Australia? I know that in more recent times this sentence has been assumed by somebody more famous than me. But let me say that for as long as I've lived in Australia, from the moment I arrived here in 1996 as a migrant from Belgium, I have often said, how good is Australia? Because this is truly a country where wherever you come from, whatever corner of the world, if you come here with the right attitude and with an intention to have a go, work hard, do the best you can in whatever your chosen field of endeavor, there is really and truly no limit to what you can achieve in your chosen field of endeavor. And the proof is in the pudding here in the Senate. I mean, we've got a leader of the opposition and a leader of the government who are both first-generation Australians from non-English speaking backgrounds. Mr. President, how good is Australia? I don't think that there would be any other country in the world where this would be possible. Mr. President, I have thoroughly loved my time in the Senate. I love this place. I mean, we come here with a whole diversity of perspectives, with different views, with different aspirations, and we represent many, many Australians with different views and aspirations. And in this chamber, we engage in the battle of ideas, we engage in political combat, we engage in the personality contest every now and then. But in the end, this is a chamber where, on behalf of the nation, by engaging in that policy debate, we are able to achieve a consensus on the best way forward. And, you know, in that process, I've always been a very enthusiastic participant, both in opposition and in government. I found it to be more fun in government, I've got to say. And got to say, well, it's more fun in government. And you know, estimates, I mean, I sort of had interjection from the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. President. I think I might have to take a point of order here. My friend Penny. I mean, like, there's probably nobody in this Parliament with whom I've sparred, you know, more vigorously and engaged more vigorously in the political battle and the battle of ideas than Senator Wong. And yet, we do have a deep personal friendship, which I'm sure she won't mind me say publicly, and we do trust each other. I mean, how good is it to work that way, where you can not give an inch in terms of fighting for what you believe in, but also work with each other to find practical and pragmatic solutions where that is in the interest of the nation. And I know that, I mean, Senator Wong and I, that is always how we both have approached it, and I very much appreciate that about you. I mean, we've been on opposite sides in Senate estimates for many, many years, first from opposition and then from government. I've got to say I enjoy that better from government too. I've decided I'm more of a batsman than a bowler. and I'm happy that I don't have to go back into a bowling session. Mr. President, when I came here in 1996, I never thought I'd end up in politics. I mean, you can't plan this. I mean, I thought I'd go and work in a law firm or in a business or whatever, and I tried to get a job in Perth, where I arrived, and back in the mid-90s, the legal fraternity in Western Australia was still comparatively protectionist in terms of the capacity of non-English speaking background or non-Australian educated law graduates to get into the legal profession. It intrigued me when years later my wife Hayley started working at Clayton Utz, and they were in the sort of mid-2000s, and people were bending over backwards to facilitate people through the process as quickly as possible from wherever they came. And I sort of thought, 10 years ago, I mean, they said I had to go back to university for another 2 years after having done 6 years at university already. And that sort of didn't seem that appealing to me at the time. And so I ended up working as a staffer for a politician, because that was the only immediately transferable skill where there wasn't any protectionism in place that I could deploy in the short term. I mean, that was not necessarily all that straightforward initially either. I mean, there was a former Senator, Alan Eggleston, in 1996, advertised for an electorate officer, and I applied for that job, and I didn't even get an interview, which I've reminded him of often since then. And I thought there's got to be a better way. So I rang the office of this recently elected Senator Chris Ellison, who recently been made the chair of the Treaties Committee, and I thought, Treaties Committee, I've done some public international law, I'm international. Treaties sounded international. I thought I'd go and have a meeting with him and see whether I can do some work for him as a volunteer. And I think he was a bit intrigued when this guy, I was young, skinny, black hair back then, with a German accent, walked in and offered to work as a volunteer, but he took a chance on me, and the rest, as they say, is history. I mean, that is how I first ended up in the Australian Parliament as a Belgian migrant in October 1996, 24 years ago. And I've essentially been one way or the other around this place ever since, and it's just been an amazing story and an amazing opportunity to contribute to public service through political service. Now, we all come here with our own personal political and policy values and perspectives, and some of my colleagues have heard me tell this story before, but I think I have to put it on the record here, and in fact my Liberal National colleagues have heard me tell this story yesterday. The thing that really persuaded me to pursue the policy and political values that are pursued by the Liberal and National parties is my experience as a student when I reflected, at the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall, on the reason why a people who, after the Second World War, started with the same challenges, opportunities, context, climate, geography, why a people divided by different political and policy choices ended up in such fundamentally different positions when it came to their quality of life, their living standards, and the general opportunities for individuals, their families, and the communities in which they lived. And really, I mean, the choices on the western side of the wall, on the western side of Germany, was a choice to pursue policies that supported individual freedom, free enterprise, reward for effort, encouraging people to stretch themselves, take risks, have a go, and all of that underpinned with a social safety net. They called it the social market economy, die soziale Marktwirtschaft. But the other thing that West Germany did, and that is also something that has always stuck with me, was they opened themselves up to the world, they engaged in open trade, they committed themselves to international competition, they committed themselves to be an outward-looking, globally focused, open trading economy. And that is where the economic miracle on the western side of Germany came from. That's where the Wirtschaftswunder came from. Whereas on the eastern side, where you had policy choices and a political system that focused on socialism and equality of outcomes, which sort of ultimately led to the lowest common denominator focus, people ended up in comparative poverty. And in the end, I mean, the wall only was built in 1961, so from 1949 they were on different trajectories. By 1961 the wall had to be built to keep people on one side in the system because people didn't want to spontaneously stay there. And then 28 years later, even the wall wasn't enough to keep people in because ultimately people have a thirst for freedom. And the wall came down. But it's the other thing that I learned was the power of the trajectory. Now, commentators and political opponents at various times have laughed at me when I talk about the power of the trajectory. But think about this. The people of East Berlin wouldn't have noticed on day 1 or 2 or 5 that they were on a different trajectory to the people of West Berlin. But when you're on a different trajectory for 40 years and you're making bad choices as opposed to good choices, when you look back after 40 years, the destination you end up in can be fundamentally different. And some people have said, oh, well, that's because, on one side it was a dictatorship and it was an autocratic political system. And that's why people weren't enjoying the same living standards. That fails to understand what is cause and what is effect. The reason the system became more and more dictatorial and more autocratic was because they had to exercise more and more control on those people who didn't want to spontaneously live in a system that restricted their freedoms. And fast forward to Australia. I mean, Australia in the 1980s, in the era post the Hawke and Keating governments, the Howard governments and subsequent governments leading all the way to the Morrison government now, since Australia has made a decision to open ourselves up to the world, to be a globally focused, open, trading economy, we have gone from strength to strength. We've gone through a period of nearly 30 years of continuous growth on the back of making the difficult decisions nearly 40 years ago of opening ourselves up to global competition. Yes, there have been difficult transitions, and of course it wasn't all easy, but it has made Australia stronger, more prosperous, and has given the Australian people better opportunities to get ahead and to have the best possible living standards. And international competition can be uncomfortable. And this is a debate that is taking place in the world now. I mean, there can be a temptation to say, wouldn't it be so much more comfortable if we protect ourselves from global competition and if we put fences around various activities so that people don't have to worry about being challenged. The problem with that is, just by putting a fence around something, just by protecting something, doesn't mean that the innovation and the competitive forces elsewhere stop. All it means is that you lose touch with where the rest of the world is at. All it means is that you fall further behind. So, as we work on getting out of this COVID recession, we've got to make sure as a nation that we continue to remember what has made us so strong over 30 years of continuous growth. And it has been a genuine commitment, which has been a bipartisan commitment, to Australia as a globally focused, open trading economy. And that has been over 30 years so far, and it will be in the future, be the best way for Australia to offer the best possible opportunities for Australians today and into the future to get ahead. Mr. President, during my time in this chamber in opposition and in government, I've been involved in a whole series of policy battles, and you win some, you lose some, but I've always been an enthusiastic and vigorous contributor in those various debates and battles. And I guess the other thing I've learned in this place is that sometimes what you are able to stop can be as important as what you are able to put in place. And one of the proud moments of my career was to be able to put the detailed and forensic scrutiny over the anti-WA mining tax, which a previous government sought to impose, 99% of the revenue of which was going to come out of one jurisdiction, and it is a moment of great personal pride that we were able to repeal that particular legislation on coming into government. But of course, I've always looked at, coming into Parliament, I've always looked at the period in opposition as the training period to prepare you in the best possible way to be able to make a meaningful contribution in government if and when you get the opportunity to serve in government. And in the Senate, I got to say, the Senate estimates process is an amazing way to be trained as a future contributor in executive government, because you get to know all the people, you get to know all the issues, and if you apply yourself to asking all of the possible questions, it is an amazing way to get across a lot of details. And it's the ultimate on-the-job university-level training, I would say. And so on coming into government in 2013, and looking back since 2013, I am proud that as a government we have been able to repair the budget to the point where by 2018-19, a great budget, the 2018-19 budget, Prime Minister, where by the time of 2018-19 we had returned the budget back into balance. We have, over the period between 2013 and 2023, prior to the coronavirus crisis hitting us, we had passed and implemented budget bottom line improvements to the tune of $250 billion. So what that means is the bottom line would have been $250 billion worse off over that period if we hadn't made the decisions and hadn't legislated the decisions that we've put forward in various budgets. Now, I've been involved in 7 budgets, 7 half-yearly budget updates, 8 final budget outcomes, a couple of pre-election economic and fiscal outlooks, and that is a pretty involved process. Every budget, every half-yearly budget update, Simon, you'll find out, it's a lot of meetings in rooms without windows. It's a lot of papers to read through. It's a lot of conversations with colleagues. It's a lot of conversations within the Expenditure Review Committee with a view of trying to make the best possible decision for the future of Australia. Now, and it's a fine balance. You want to make decisions to allocate resources where that is appropriate, as much as necessary, as little as possible. Simon, you want to make sure that the expenditure is effective in achieving the policy objective that you're pursuing as a government. But you also are always very mindful that if we don't get this prioritization right, there are real consequences for real people. And so, in particular, in this year, 2020, as we were hit with the coronavirus crisis, and we had to make some of the decisions on things like JobKeeper, JobSeeker, and so on. We were very, very, very conscious, and it was mentally and emotionally really quite a heavy burden to really think through what this meant for real people. Over this period, the successful legislation of personal income tax cuts in 2018 and 2019 to the value now of $350 billion, putting more money into workers' pockets, helping to stimulate the economy and generate growth by boosting aggregate demand. That is, one of my personal highlights in terms of legislation going through the Senate during this period. I mean, it was quite hotly contested the first two times. It was comparatively easy today to bring these income tax cuts forward, various savings bills. One of the things I just want to reflect on, and this is something where the coalition and the Greens came together, Senate voting reforms. Before we reformed the Senate voting systems, there was this lottery where somehow the 97% of people who voted one above the line immediately lost control of their preferences, and those preferences were traded by so-called preference whisperers who were doing deals behind closed doors which weren't transparent at all. And the reforms that we passed were reforms that empowered voters to not only determine where their first preference goes if voting above the line, but also where their second, third and subsequent preferences would go above the line. So instead of having people get elected into the Senate with very low number of votes, whatever our views on the views of individual senators represented in this chamber now, the people who are here because a sufficient number of Australians backed them in. And they're here because they reflect the views and aspirations of a sufficient number of Australians, not because of some accidental lottery based on a backroom deal. And, 40 hours of debate, including one through the night, I think we started on a Thursday afternoon at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and we went to 2 o'clock the next afternoon straight. And the Labor Party was running a roster against me. With every hour, I think we had quorum calls, and we had motions to suspend the Senate, and everybody turned up. And this is where I've got to say, what a fantastic team I've had the privilege to work with here in the Senate. We've been involved in many battles for the nation, and we've won many good battles for the nation that will put Australia on a stronger foundation trajectory for the future for some time to come. I'm proud of my work, which is perhaps not as well known, but Senator Wong knows about, the Australian-Germany Advisory Group. One of the jobs I was given by Prime Minister Abbott in 2014 at the G20 Leaders Summit, when we had a bilateral meeting with Chancellor Merkel, was to co-chair this group, the Australia-Germany Advisory Group, to explore ways to broaden, deepen and strengthen the bilateral relationship with Germany. Now, Germany, the biggest economic power in Europe, the fourth biggest economic power in the world, we had friendly relations, but we weren't really top of mind with each other. It was a very long distance. I mean, Germany is a very important economy in Europe, and Europe is a very important economy, and perhaps one that historically we accessed primarily through the United Kingdom because of obvious historical ties. But the work that we did to strengthen our relationship with Germany and with France and with other countries on the continent will stand us in good stead moving forward, as we now are pursuing a trade agreement separately with the European Union and with the United Kingdom post the Brexit vote in the UK. I'm going to go just quickly, mindful of time and not wanting to hold everybody up for too long. But at a WA level, other than being able to get rid of the mining tax, GST reform and the reform of GST sharing arrangements, making sure that we delivered a fairer, better deal for Western Australia in a way that was good for the country, that encouraged and facilitated stronger national growth, and was also good for every other state because we calibrated the arrangement such that no other state was worse off. In fact, states were better off. And that is a real credit to Scott Morrison as Treasurer, who worked with his Liberal colleagues from WA and who worked really hard and really smart to come up with a creative way of delivering the outcome. And the people of Western Australia will be forever grateful for the work you did there, Prime Minister. And let me say, The West Australian state government, my good friend, the Treasurer of Western Australia, Ben White, delivered his budget in Western Australia yesterday, and he delivered a $1.2 billion surplus. $1.2 billion surplus. Not bad in a pandemic, I guess. But you know how much the GST top-up payment is as a result of our reforms this financial year? $1.5 billion. So a $1.2 billion surplus and a $1.5 billion GST top-up payment, courtesy of the Morrison reforms to the GST sharing arrangements. So I mean, that puts it very starkly, I thought. With my colleagues, I've also been proud to have been able to help deliver a fair share of federal infrastructure funding for the great state of Western Australia. I want to just now turn to the marriage law postal survey for a moment, if you don't mind. For the entire period that I've been in this parliament, the issue of marriage equality kept popping back up, and it was never resolved. And it became increasingly divisive in the community, and there was clearly a very strong push to resolve this issue and to get it dealt with once and for all. And across the Australian community, there was, among good, reasonable, good Australians, a diversity of views, which was not easily reconcilable. Good Australians can legitimately have a different perspective on this, and we needed to find a way to resolve this issue once and for all for the nation in a way that kept the nation together. And I know there was a big push that this should just be dealt with by a vote in Parliament without consulting the Australian people. Let me tell you, I am proud for the role that I've been able to play to facilitate the effective, professional conduct of the Australian Marriage Law Postal Service through the ABS, which did an outstanding job in helping to deliver it. The result was there for all to see, and the result, I believe, helped achieve that reform in a way that had public support. If the Parliament had imposed this on the Australian people, there would have always been one side of the community that would have resented that change having been imposed. Having made that decision the way we have, the reform was achieved, but in a way that kept the nation together. Mr. President, this has been an amazing opportunity to serve my country, the country that I chose to make my home. All of us come here with the support of a whole range of different people, but fundamentally our parties select us, and the people vote for us at elections. I would like to thank the West Australian Liberal Party for the trust they've put in me, a non-English speaking background migrant who'd been in the country for less than 11 years at the time. I promised that I would give it my best. I hope that you agree that I have. When I got here, I was here at the tail end of the Howard government, and I just thought, wow, this is just amazing. How did I end up in this party room with John Howard? I mean, absolute giant. I mean, and somebody that I deeply admired. But then we went through a period in opposition. Brendan Nelson, fine Australian, great Australian. Malcolm Turnbull, with whom I had a very good personal and working relationship. Much has been written, but I think the Prime Minister would agree. Peter Dutton, my friend Peter Dutton would agree, that during the period of his leadership, we all worked very hard to help make him the most successful Prime Minister he could possibly be. And a lot of good things were achieved during that period. A lot of good things were achieved during that period. Tony Abbott, who nearly won the election for us in 2010, worked so hard, who did win the election in 2013, like obviously a man of strong convictions and who first put me into the cabinet. I will forever be grateful for the opportunities that he's given me. Scott Morrison. Scott and I, we are very close friends. we have worked together exceptionally well. So don't believe all of the stuff that you read in the media. We are very, very good friends. And yes, we engage in debates on policy, and we don't always agree. Newsflash, in politics, you look at issues and you have ideas on the best way forward and how to resolve things, and you sort of, with the overlay of your political values, and from time to time you have different perspectives, and the debate that you engage in brings you to a better way forward. And that is actually the way this system is meant to work. That is the way the Expenditure Review Committee is meant to work, the Cabinet is meant to work. The reason Cabinet discussions are confidential is so that you can openly engage and robustly engage in this sort of debate, because that is how you end up with the best possible decisions for your country. And it is true that Scott and I, on occasions, have had robust conversations on policy. But we've always been close and trusted friends, in this endeavour as we seek to achieve the best outcomes for our nation. And let me say, as I'm leaving this place, I'm feeling comfortable in the knowledge that Scott Morrison is leading a strong and united and cohesive team, the strongest, most united and most cohesive team that I've been a part of since I've been in this parliament on our side of politics. And so, as I become citizen Cormann, Prime Minister, I wish you and your government all the very best into the future. I also want to thank Bridget, Senator McKenzie, as leader of the Nationals. Again, we are two different parties, and from time to time we have different perspectives on different issues, but we've always worked together exceptionally well, and with the right sort of overall attitude and commitment to finding solutions, and I really very much thank you for the way you have engaged with me. In fact, I would like to thank all of my Liberal National colleagues for having supported me through my endeavours. I would like to thank every senator in this chamber. I have thoroughly enjoyed engaging with all of you, and I thoroughly respect and value the work you do for our nation. It is your job to go hard for what you believe in. It is your job to engage in the debates that you engage in, and I know that you will continue to do so. And let me just say, Penny, I do hope that we'll stay in touch even after we've left this place. Crossbench, I've had a great diversity of people on the crossbench over the years. Steve Fielding, Nick Xenophon, Glenn Lazarus, Senator Lambie, Senator Roberts, Senator Hanson, of course, all our good friends in the Greens over the years, with Senator Bob Brown was the leader when I got here, Senator Milne, Senator Di Natale, and now, of course, Senator Waters. I have always, sought to find a way to find common ground, even when that initially appeared somewhat impossible. Senator Patrick is, knows how persistent I can be in trying to find common ground. And I thank all of you, Senator Lionham, Senator Dye. There's been quite a long list of different crossbench perspectives over the years. But let me say, it's been such a privilege to work with every single one of you, and I will be watching you from a distance and wishing you all the best. I've been blessed with the great staff that I've had during my time in office. Senator Slade Brockman was my chief of staff in opposition for most of my period in opposition, and we've done some great things together. And here he is. He's now making his own contribution in his own right, and he's doing a magnificent job, in particular across regional Western Australia. I've had 3 chiefs of staff in government. Simon Atkinson, who's gone to better and higher things, but made an outstanding contribution in my office during my first 3 years as finance minister, and an exceptional public servant, and I'm sure that he has got much further to go under governments of either persuasion, and I wish you very well. Belinda Pola, an outstanding professional who decided to go back to Queensland to have a family, but made a great contribution in my office for quite some time. And Chris Brown, who I think is here somewhere. At the back, yeah. Who has held the fort for some time now. I first, I mean, he doesn't know this, but I first picked him as a future staffer when I first saw him at a Young Liberal function in 2008. I thought, this guy is talented. And then by 2015, there was an opportunity and I snatched him. And he's done a great job in my office. It's hard to go through, I don't want to go through a whole shopping list of names, and I hope that my other very hard-working staff members will forgive me by just limiting it to a few. But Natasha Lobo, my EI in Perth, has worked with me. I first hired her in 1997, and she's been with me in my WI Senate office for the entire period. Just an amazing support and amazing loyalty over so many years. And of course, Karen Wu, who has worked for 7 years as the senior media advisor in government, and I mean, that's a tough job. And so thank you very much for your service over that time. And Philippa Campbell, who she came to me after a long period in Peter Costello's office, and so she knew a lot of what I needed to know when I started in this job, and has been an amazing support. Secretaries in my department, I had the privilege of being the minister for the best department in the Commonwealth. Prime Minister, Finance is the best department in the Commonwealth. Simon, Finance is the best department in the Commonwealth. You're close enough to the centre without being right at the centre. Like, you're close enough to being able to help shape the decisions and the directions without being entirely on the front line. And you've got a group of professionals in the department that are just outstanding. And I mean, David Tune was there to settle me in when I arrived, and I did know him out of the estimates period. And you know, he was very generous to me, and so I guess teaching me the ropes as a new minister initially. Jane Holton, the formidable Jane Holton, deployed all of her energy and passion to taking me to another level. And Rosemary Huxtable, just an amazing, world-class public servant. It's been such a privilege to work with you over the entire period. Rosemary was the Deputy Secretary Budget in Finance when I arrived, and we did our first few budgets from that position, and in more recent years became the Secretary of the department. And Rosemary, I really value the work that we've been able to do together to help put our nation on the best possible foundation and trajectory for the future. I would also like to thank the clerks who, in opposition in particular, have been so helpful in boosting my training to give the government of the day at the time the hardest possible time. And all of the tricks that I learned in opposition from the clerks, I knew how to defend myself against when we were in government, which was fantastic. Not always, but perhaps a bit better than I otherwise might have. The chamber attendants here who are always unfailingly courteous. I mean, this has been just such a great workplace, and I mean, everybody just makes it tick in such a nice and friendly and courteous fashion. But I would like to finish by firstly thanking my parents for the opportunity they've given me as a child growing up. I'm not your typical liberal background politician. I mean, my parents are working class. My mum was a full-time mum. My dad was a factory worker. He got sick. He ended up on a disability pension. They had 4 kids. By the time they were 28, it wasn't sort of plain sailing, but they bent over backwards to give me opportunity, and for that I will forever be grateful. And I would like to finish by saying a very sincere thank you to Hayley. Hayley is an outstanding woman. She's an amazing individual. She's obviously my life's partner and best friend. She's an amazing mother to our beautiful children, Isabel and Charlotte. But she's an outstanding professional woman with a distinguished career in her own right. I mean, she was the president of the Law Society in WA at age 35, and I'm so proud of what Hayley has achieved now working at the bar in Perth, and to observe the respect in which she's held by her colleagues and her peers in that profession. And Hayley had to build her career throughout that entire period while I was mostly away. During the 7 years as finance minister, I was essentially over East every week from the middle of January to the middle of December, every week. And, you know, we had 2 kids. Hayley had her own career. I was over here. So she has carried a very substantial burden for me being able to pursue this opportunity and provide to do this job, and I will forever be grateful for that. Thank you very much, Hayley. So, colleagues, this is my last contribution from this chair in this chamber. There's probably more that I could or should have said, but I think the hour is advancing. I give you this commitment. After today, I won't be back.